The world leader, the President of the United States, was assassinated at home. His head of security didn't immediately report the death. Instead, he first observed the scene.
Jane, I need you to lock down and sweep the residence. No one in, no one out.
Obviously, there was a huge conspiracy behind the president's death. Now, in the future world, there would be a nuclear war that covers all countries. Many wealthy individuals in the United States were already prepared. They hollowed out the entire Rocky Mountains, creating an underground city capable of housing 25,000 people. Everything here looked just like the outside world. Humans seemed destined to live in the underground city forever. But one day, a red light suddenly appeared in the sky of the underground city. A prompt appeared before everyone. What on earth was going on? At the beginning of the story, the personal bodyguard, Xavier, went to work as usual. He opened the door and found the president dead in his residence. Xavier remained calm, but he did not report it immediately. He and his most trusted companion, Billy, carefully observed the surroundings. Through various signs at the scene, Xavier could determine that the president was killed on the balcony. But for some reason, he'd been dragged to the bedroom. Perhaps this was related to the pair of earrings on the table. In addition, Xavier could determine from the number of wine glasses at the scene that there was another person here last night, and it was a woman. Finally, Xavier checked the items and found a blood-soaked cigarette case, and a tablet was missing. In the heavily guarded underground city, there was a mysterious place where all the confidential documents of the underground city were stored. These documents were like a powerful bomb. If they fell into the hands of criminals, the consequences would be unimaginable. It could cause irreparable damage. After confirming the importance and security of the documents, Xavier went to the surveillance room, and he knew that, to uncover the truth of the president's death, he must find the last person who had contact with the president. The surveillance video might be the key to unraveling the mystery. When the monitoring screen lit up, the president's daily activities were clearly displayed before Xavier. In the video, the president's every move was recorded. It even included intimate moments of him dating his lover at night. At that moment, Xavier's attention was drawn to the earrings on the woman's ears. They were exactly the same as the earrings left at the crime scene. His heart was filled with confusion and unease, and he didn't know what kind of secret was hidden behind this. But what troubled him even more was that the woman's identity was his own boss. From the surveillance video, the boss left while the president was still unharmed. After that, Xavier reported the day's work to the president as usual. Since then, there had been no one entering or leaving the president's room. If things were really as the surveillance showed, then Xavier himself was undoubtedly the biggest suspect. However, Xavier was not frightened by this sudden dilemma. He suppressed his inner panic and continued watching the video. Soon, he made a new discovery. Billy had fallen asleep on the sofa shortly after starting work last night. More than an hour later, the surveillance video suddenly froze. It was as if the pause button had been pressed. It remained frozen for an hour and a half before returning to normal. At that time, Billy happened to wake up from his sleep. In this way, the situation seemed to have worsened even more. Was it Billy's negligence that led to the murder of the president last night, and he was asleep for an hour and a half without noticing any of the suspects? However, one thing always puzzled Xavier. Why did the person in charge of monitoring last night not report it after seeing the video freeze? With this question in mind, Xavier went to find Jenny, the head of monitoring from last night. However, the scene before him greatly shocked him. The interaction between Jenny and Billy clearly went beyond that of ordinary colleagues. The ambiguity in the eyes of two people seems to be telling an unknown secret. Xavier's mind was racing with thoughts. He simply ordered Jenny to notify the higher-ups about the president's death. At this point, half an hour had passed since he found the president's death, which quickly attracted high-level attention from all sides. The first to arrive at the scene was State Advisor Sinatra. She looked serious. Following her were Xavier's direct superior, Robinson, as well as the president's wife and his father, who suffered from dementia. After all relevant personnel had arrived, the investigation and questioning immediately began. In this investigation, Xavier became a key suspect. Robinson personally handled the questioning of him. The main content of the inquiry was the circumstances of Xavier's conversation with the president last night. Xavier calmly stated that it was just normal small talk in a work report. This explanation was reasonable. Robinson said nothing further after hearing that, but her eyes still revealed a hint of suspicion. Even so, Xavier remained the main suspect. For the next 2 weeks, he would be suspended from all duties and be under close surveillance. Xavier had no objections to this handling of the situation. However, he didn't plan to wait for Robinson and others to investigate, so he secretly took the bloodstained cigarette case from the scene. He hoped to find clues about the president's death within it. He found that one of the cigarettes inside had 6 numbers written on it. Xavier didn't know what this meant, but he could guess it was definitely related to the president's death. But before Xavier could figure out what these numbers meant, he was once again ordered to be arrested by Robinson. This time, Xavier was taken directly to the interrogation room, because Robinson, through the investigation during this time, learned that Xavier had actually investigated alone for half an hour after discovering the president's death. Only after that did he report everything. He was already a key suspect. This further confirmed Robinson's suspicions. Soon after, Xavier was hooked up to a lie detector. Robinson began by asking about various small matters, planning to gradually delve deeper, ultimately to break through Xavier's psychological defenses. However, no matter how she questioned him, even bringing up Xavier's dead wife, his reaction remained calm. Seeing that she couldn't get any useful information, Robinson stopped trying to hide her intentions and pointedly asked the key questions.
Did you kill him?
Regarding these questions, Xavier naturally denied it again, but his fluctuating emotions turned into a knife of evidence. If nothing unexpected happened, Xavier would immediately be taken as the murderer. Just then, a surprise guest suddenly burst into the interrogation room. It was the president's psychological advisor. She asked Xavier just one question.
Is a part of you happy that Cal is dead?
And she received a positive response, but he really couldn't understand why she would reveal the answer to him. However, he knew it, that having come this far, the situation couldn't get much worse. Psychological advisor Gabby, after receiving Xavier's response, began a series of actions. She successfully convinced Sinatra, who was observing outside the interrogation room, to believe that Xavier was not the murderer. It turned out that the question Gabby asked earlier had a hidden meaning. A few years ago, a nuclear war broke out. The shadow of doom covered the earth. Xavier managed to enter the underground city with his 2 children after great hardship, but his wife did not qualify. Finally, she died painfully in the nuclear war. This incident became a scar that never healed in Xavier's heart. Over the years, he had a lot of grievances against the president. Additionally, his previous behavior was suspicious, making him a natural focus of suspicion. However, Gabby had a different judgment. She knew well that if Xavier were truly the murderer, he would not act so openly, nor would he show a happy look. Based on this reasoning, Gabby helped clear Xavier's name. Of course, Gabby did this not out of any feelings, but because of the president's last wishes. Although Xavier often expressed dissatisfaction with the president after arriving in the underground city, yet his loyalty had been tested. In the past, he had risked his own safety several times to protect the president from assassination attempts. Otherwise, with his background, he had no right to enter this underground city that symbolizes hope, let alone knew the location of the top-secret tablet stored there. With Gabby's help, Xavier regained his freedom. That afternoon, he attended a press conference called by Sinatra. Sinatra claimed at the conference that the former president had died of a sudden heart attack. Then she immediately promoted the second richest person in the underground city to be the new president. Such a hasty and frivolous action, Xavier saw at a glance that the new president was merely a puppet in Sinatra's hands. But Xavier was powerless to change this. The only thing he could do was investigate the true cause of the former president's death. Xavier held the numbered cigarette and examined it closely. He did not overlook any detail, but he found nothing. He guessed that perhaps lighting the cigarette would reveal something. With a glimmer of hope, he lit the cigarette. However, the result left him greatly disappointed. The cigarette burned without any abnormalities. It seemed to be just an ordinary cigarette marked with numbers. The investigation fell into a deadlock once again. Just when he was filled with anxiety and had no solutions, he suddenly thought of Gabby, the psychological advisor who had helped him. Gabby was close to the president. She might know some important clues that were not publicly known. This glimmer of hope reignited Xavier's determination to find the truth. He learned a shocking clue from her.
He said if something should happen to him, I should find you. He said Billy Pace is dangerous.
Hearing these words, Xavier felt a mix of suspicion and uncertainty. Billy was his most trusted companion. He had shared the entire investigation process with him. He had even told him all the numbers on the cigarette he held. Yet he might be the murderer of the president. Such a huge reversal, even Xavier found it hard to accept. However, since it was the president's last wish, there must be a reason for it. The next day, an investigation result further confirmed Billy's suspicion, because Robinson and the others discovered that the freeze in the surveillance video didn't suddenly appear that day, but had started a month ago. Most importantly, it occurred exactly when Billy was sleeping. They then investigated the network logs and found that someone had infiltrated the system each time, and the IP address happened to belong to Jenny, the person in charge. Robinson immediately launched an investigation into the two of them. Their answers surprised everyone.
We were playing Wii.
It turned out that the peace of the underground city had made them both slack, so every time the night grew quiet, they would sneak off to play the president's video game console. That was why they turned off the villa's surveillance cameras. Yet they encountered something like the president's assassination. Their reasoning, although unexpected, was still very logical. Without evidence proving they were the murderers, they could only be let go. However, Robinson believed that this evidence would soon be in his hands, because after forensic examination it was determined that the president was attacked from behind with a blunt object. But he didn't die immediately. It seemed there had been a struggle. In this case, it was possible to find the murderer's residual DNA under the president's nails. At that time, the murderer would surely be brought to justice. In the underground city, due to the special conditions here, the test results would take 2 days to come back. During this long wait, everyone could only be patient, hoping that the truth would soon be revealed. However, the calm was shattered that evening. The main suspect, Billy, drove up to Xavier's house while he was away. He stared at the figure of Xavier's daughter by the window, and his eyes were unpredictable. No one knew what he was thinking. What was even more chilling was that there was a handgun hidden in his car. It should be known that all firearms were destroyed at the beginning of the underground city's construction. So where did he get this gun? Clearly, Billy's identity was far from what it appeared to be. Meanwhile, Xavier's suspicion of Billy grew stronger. He was convinced that Billy was the one who murdered the president. In order to find evidence, he went to the archives to try to find clues in Billy's records. But unexpectedly, this investigation led him to discover an even bigger secret. Most of Billy's records had been completely erased. The small portion that remained was also tarnished with a bad history. It turned out that Billy had been imprisoned for murder. By common logic, someone with such a background had no qualification to enter the underground city. At this moment, Xavier became increasingly convinced that there was a huge web of conspiracy hidden behind the underground city, and he was completely unaware of the existence of this web. In order to validate his suspicions, Xavier sent Billy a message inviting him to meet up, but Billy refused, citing his duty as an excuse. Xavier was downstairs at that moment, watching him deliberately hide the truth. Xavier became even more certain that Billy was a major suspect. The next day, Xavier finally found an opportunity. He casually approached Billy and asked him about his duty from the previous night. Seeing that Billy still wanted to brush him off, Xavier no longer hid anything and spoke of his discoveries and long-buried doubts.
What the fuck did you do? Billy, did you kill him?
As soon as Billy saw Xavier, his expression instantly became tense and his eyes flustered. His hands instinctively clenched tightly. He spoke rapidly, urgently defending himself, saying that he hadn't intended to refuse the invitation last night, added that he couldn't get away because Jenny was at his house. Then, mentioning the absurd rumors about the assassination of the president, Billy was filled with rage. He stated that it was simply nonsense. After everything they had been through together, how could he do such a thing? Xavier fell into deep thought. Memories flooded back to him, their first meeting, and the hardships they faced together in the underground city. Those days of struggling together bore witness to their character. In the end, Xavier chose to believe Billy. Then Billy recounted that part of his past. It turned out that he lost both of his parents at a young age. Then he was taken in by his uncle, thinking he would have someone to rely on. But unexpectedly, his uncle was a psychologically twisted person and intended to train him to be a cold-blooded killer. Every day, Billy was forced to hunt a certain number of prey. If he made even the slightest mistake, he would be beaten mercilessly. One time during training, Billy's beloved dog suddenly barked, scaring away the prey. His uncle rushed over and yelled at him and cruelly demanded that Billy kill the dog left by his parents. Otherwise, he would cut off Billy's food supply. Between survival and his beloved dog, Billy struggled in agony. Ultimately, he made an unexpected decision that he shot and killed his uncle. From that moment on, Billy became a murderer. He was sent to a juvenile detention center. Upon entering the detention center, it was filled with troubled children. Billy was bullied relentlessly, but he did not sink into despair. He quickly realized that only by making himself strong could he stop being bullied. So he began to train hard. Every time he was knocked down, he got back up without hesitation and defeated those who provoked him. Gradually, Billy established himself in the detention center and became the feared boss of the place. Years later, he finally walked out of the place that had confined him for so long. To his surprise, there were people there to welcome him. Later, he learned that someone valued his experience and invited him to join a mercenary group. His experiences in prison made Billy unafraid of any opponent. He easily passed the mercenary selection process and then was sent by someone with intentions to the underground city. As for who the mastermind behind this was, Billy did not clarify. Nevertheless, it was clear that Billy trusted Xavier. After hearing his story, Xavier found psychological advisor Gabby to express his belief that Billy was absolutely not the murderer of the president. After parting with Xavier, Billy went to a bar. He watched the owner busying himself alone and fell into memories once again. Many years ago, not long after he had arrived in the underground city, he suddenly received an assignment from his mastermind superior. He had to eliminate a research team whose leader was an atmospheric research expert who happened to be the bar owner's wife. The 4-member team was commissioned by the president to explore the situation outside the underground city. After all, he didn't want to be trapped here for the rest of his life. The research team indeed found a pregnant woman and some settlements outside the underground city. They immediately confirmed that the radiation outside had almost dissipated. The air was breathable. They wanted to inform the president of the underground city about this finding. However, at that moment, Billy suddenly appeared and killed all 4 of them. However, he did not understand at all why they could not inform the people in the underground city about this. So when submitting the mission, he posed the question to his superior, Sinatra. Regarding this question, Sinatra also provided her answer.
Conditions, even if they're technically livable, they're not hospitable. The best place to be, if you want anything remotely resembling a decent life on Earth, is right here.
At that time, Billy believed her without question. Looking back now, it seemed to have deeper implications. He was very worried that his friend Xavier would end up being killed by Sinatra, just like those researchers. Billy immediately made a request, hoping that she wouldn't lay a hand on Xavier. Sinatra had already decided on the elimination plan. Seeing Billy being so obtuse, she immediately issued a warning to him.
One of the 25,000 people lucky enough to be spared and then protected by me.
At this moment, Billy showed no fear for the sake of his friend. He didn't take Sinatra's threat seriously at all. Instead, he provoked her further.
You gonna send somebody for me? You better make sure it's the biggest motherfucker you got.
Seeing that this subordinate was about to lose control, Sinatra decided to arrange for someone to eliminate Billy. So that night, while Billy was chatting with Jenny at his place, he suddenly felt unwell. Then he collapsed to the floor. Meanwhile, Jenny remained calm and indifferent. Billy couldn't understand why she didn't rush to help. Jenny's next words left Billy feeling hopeless.
You told her to send the biggest motherfucker she had. I'm it, baby.
He never expected that Jenny was also one of Sinatra's subordinates. And just like that, Billy died in his home, feeling frustrated. The next day, on the day of the president's funeral, everyone in the underground city would attend. However, Xavier waited for a long time, but did not see his companion, Billy. He felt a vague sense of unease in his heart. Just then, Xavier heard from Robinson that the testing agency had never received the items sent by the forensic team, and the only ones who knew about this at the time were Xavier, Robinson, and State Advisor Sinatra. Only she could have done such a thing. Hearing this name, Xavier's heart grew more restless, because he recalled that, on the day of the president's assassination, Sinatra had had a quarrel with him. However, when Xavier arrived, the two had already stopped. Clearly, Sinatra was very suspicious. But before that, he needed to find his companion, Billy. Xavier asked Jenny if she had any news about Billy. Jenny said she hadn't seen him all day. Xavier realized something was wrong, then hurried to Billy's home. He kicked open the locked door. It was then that he saw Billy had been poisoned to death. Jenny, who accompanied him, fell onto him in tears. She seemed really heartbroken, and that cheated Xavier too. He never suspected that she was the one who had killed his friend. Billy's death left Xavier utterly despondent. He drank at the bar. At that moment, his superior, Robinson, suddenly found him and informed Xavier of 2 things. First was the cause of Billy's death. According to the forensic examination, Billy had died from an overdose of a tranquilizer, so it was concluded to be suicide. Secondly, Robinson, during his time with the president, learned many secrets of the underground city. Among them was the fact that some wealthy individuals, to maintain their power, were secretly hiding firearms, and that the former president was merely a puppet. because one day the president accidentally discovered that he didn't have the authority to know all the secrets of the underground city. Later, he remembered his father. Although his father was suffering from dementia, he had been one of the first wealthy individuals involved in the construction of the underground city. Sure enough, while his father was asleep, the president used his father's access to open those confidential files. It was then that he learned that the research team he had sent out had actually been killed by Billy under Sinatra's orders. The president decided he would no longer be a puppet and wrote down the address coordinates recorded in the documents on a piece of paper. He engraved the audio files inside onto a disc to prevent them from completely disappearing after his failure. But that alone was not enough. The president then found his psychological advisor and informed her that if something happened to him, then the only one he could trust was his bodyguard, Xavier. Billy would be a major suspect. Once he was fully prepared, the president began to launch his counterattack. On the day he was assassinated, it was this matter that caused him to argue with Sinatra. Hearing this, Xavier was also extremely shocked. If this were true, then avenging the president would become much more difficult, because they had no firearms at all. However, Robinson said this was not a big problem, because before he died, the president had told her that a stash of firearms was hidden beneath the gymnasium. Upon hearing this news, Xavier immediately decided to join Robinson in avenging the president. So, Xavier returned home and told his children to quickly pack their things and hide. He then went to find his neighbor, who worked at the control center of the underground city. He owed Xavier a big favor. Now, he used this as an excuse to ask him to plug a USB drive into the control computer. The neighbor didn't know what Xavier was planning, but he agreed nonetheless. That evening, while the neighbor was at work, he took the opportunity to insert the USB drive into the control computer. The next moment, the sky above the underground city turned crimson. All the residents looked up to see several words floating in the air. This was the signal of the impending attack by Xavier and others. This concludes the content from episodes 1 to 5 of Paradise. The film was released this January. Although it appears to be an apocalyptic film set in an underground city, actually, it resembles a detective mystery film. The show grabs attention right from the start. The assassination of the president quickly immerses the audience in a tense atmosphere. It sparks strong curiosity about the murderer and the conspiracy behind it. The narrative employs a dual timeline of past and present. The present storyline revolves around the investigation of the president's assassination. The past timeline explains the establishment of Paradise Town, as well as the background stories and pasts of the characters. This narrative style makes the plot both rich and coherent. The audience can gradually piece together a complete story structure. The story is set in an underground refuge called Paradise Town after the apocalypse. This setting adds a strong sci-fi flavor and sense of mystery to the plot. It showcases the survival pressures in a context of limited resources and prompts reflection on human nature and social structures in an apocalyptic backdrop. The environmental design of the underground world is filled with a futuristic vibe. High-tech equipment blends with the oppressive atmosphere of the post-apocalypse. The cold, metallic textures, dim lighting, and unique architectural styles create a realistic underground refuge environment for the audience. In terms of color, the overall tone may lean towards darkness to reflect the oppression and looming crisis of the apocalypse. However, in some scenes, such as certain living scenes within Paradise Town, there will be relatively bright colors appearing, creating a contrast. This hints the theme of hope amid despair. If you like my channel, please click to subscribe to my channel